Black. Step back. You're soiling my food.
I'm sorry, sir.
Look at her, Tanaka. Black, poor hands, touching plates that cost more than her rent.
I'll call the manager, sir.
People like you were born to clean sewers, not to breathe near my drinks.
Yes, sir.
Say that again. I like people who know their place. I like you who kotoba wa wakakuru wa ne.
No black waitress in America could understand it.
He had no idea that she was fluent in 6 languages. He had no idea that the words that followed would end his career.
In front of every diner on the 62nd floor tonight. Her name was Belle Nolan, 32 years old, 4 years on the floor at the Wexley Room, the kind of restaurant where a single dinner cost more than most people's monthly rent. She had been on shift since 2 in the afternoon. This was her 7th table of the night. She balanced 3 plates on her left forearm without looking down. Her non-slip shoes made a soft squeak against the polished oak floor. Inside her apron pocket sat a small leather notebook, worn at the edges. 11 years of late nights were written inside it. We will come back to that notebook. The man insulting her was Gerald Whitmore. Real estate, Forbes 400, 3 Manhattans deep and proud of every one. The woman across from him was his wife, Catherine. She had not eaten in 20 minutes. She had not spoken in longer. 15 years ago, Catherine had been an investigative reporter at the Chicago Sun-Times. She had walked away from her career the same year she married Gerald. Tonight, she set her fork down beside her plate and did not pick it up again. The third person at the table was the reason this dinner existed. Hiroshi Tanaka, senior executive from a manufacturing group in Osaka. Polite, formal, quietly uncomfortable. He kept checking his phone. His interpreter was 40 minutes late and not answering messages. Without that interpreter, this deal could not close tonight. Bell took the order. Tanaka asked, in Japanese, whether the salmon was wild-caught. Gerald translated, wrong. Bell said nothing, but in her head, she corrected him. She had heard that voice before. Not from Gerald. From the men her grandmother used to wash sheets for. From the diners who mistook her quiet for stupidity. From the world her grandmother had warned her about when she was 9 years old. Right away, sir, she said. Flawless American English. She walked back to the kitchen. What Gerald did not know was that the contract he had flown 3,000 miles to sign was about to die in his own mouth. And the only person in this restaurant who could save it was the black woman he had just called a sewer cleaner. In the kitchen, the air was hotter than the dining room by 20 degrees. Steam rose from the pass. The expediter called out tickets and clipped half sentences. Belle slid her 3 empty plates into the wash bin and pulled the next order. James Holloway, the sous chef, was waiting for her with 2 new entrees plated and ready. He was 53, salt and pepper hair, soft eyes. He had known her grandmother once, a long time ago, in a different neighborhood. He looked at Belle's face for a half-second longer than usual. He saying things again? She nodded once. Want me to swap tables with Maria? No, I've got it. He held her gaze for another beat. Then he set the plates onto her tray. Ruth would be proud of you tonight, he said quietly. Whatever happens next. Belle did not answer. She just lifted the tray and walked back to the swinging doors. Out on the floor, Gerald had escalated. He was performing now, for Tanaka, for himself, for the bottle of Bordeaux he had ordered 3 glasses ago. He waved his hand at Belle as she approached. There she is, he said. Look how slow they walk, like they don't care if your food gets cold. Belle set the plates down without a word. Her hands did not shake. She had a trick her grandmother had taught her when she was 9. Count to 4 on the inhale. Count to 4 on the exhale. It was the kind of breathing that came in handy when the world tried to make you small. She poured water into Tanaka's glass. He looked up at her, and for a brief moment, his eyes carried something that did not belong at this table. Pity. Discomfort. Maybe shame. He did not know yet that she could understand him. He spoke quietly, in Japanese, to Gerald. He said something low and cruel about her uniform. about the way her hair was pulled back, about what kind of woman ended up serving dinner on the 62nd floor at her age. He laughed at his own line. Gerald laughed harder. Belle finished pouring. She set the carafe down. And then she did something she had never done in 4 years on this floor. She spoke to Tanaka, in Japanese, the most formal level of Japanese a person can speak, the level reserved for elders, for emperors, for the kind of respect a junior diplomat shows a head of state. Her pronunciation was not learned from an app. It was lived. She said, in calm, perfect Japanese, "Sir, your water is full. Is there anything else you require this evening?" Tanaka froze. His chopstick stopped halfway to his mouth. His eyes went wide, because in 15 years of doing business in Tokyo, he had learned to recognize one sound above all others. The sound of someone who did not just speak the language, but understood the architecture of respect inside it. She had answered his cruelty with the highest form of grace the language had to offer. She had also let him know, without raising her voice, that she had heard every word. Gerald, oblivious, kept drinking. Tanaka set his chopsticks down. He looked at Belle. She did not look back. She simply tucked the carafe under her arm and walked toward the next table. In the service hallway, Belle leaned her back against the wall for one breath, closed her eyes, pulled the leather notebook from her apron, flipped through 3 pages. Japanese honorifics on one page, French verb conjugations on another, a column of Mandarin tones in the margin. 11 years of late nights. Margaret Sullivan, the floor manager, walked past her on the way to the host stand. She paused. "You good, Belle?" "Long night, Margaret." Margaret nodded. She did not press. She had seen things on this floor before. She knew when to ask and when to just keep walking. Belle put the notebook back in her apron. She walked back out toward Gerald's table. The contract was about to come out of his briefcase. She did not know that yet, but Tanaka did. To understand how a waitress in Chicago learned to speak Japanese like a diplomat, you have to go back 23 years. South Side. A corner laundromat on 79th Street. The smell of detergent and warm cotton. Behind the counter stood a woman named Ruth Nolan, Belle's grandmother. 5th grade education, 3 newspapers a day, a radio that played jazz from morning until close. Belle was 9 years old the first time her grandmother said the line that would shape the rest of her life. "Belle, listen to me. The world is going to look at your hands and decide what's in your head. Make sure what's in your head is bigger than anything they can imagine." Belle did not understand it then. She would come to understand it slowly, year by year, every time someone underestimated her at a register, in a classroom, on a bus. By 16, she was working 2 jobs. Her mother worked 3. There was no money for college prep, no tutors, no test fees. There was a public library on 95th and Halsted, open until 9. That is where Belle found her first Japanese language cassette tape. The plastic case was cracked. The label was peeling. She listened on a yellow Walkman she had found at a yard sale for $1. By 22, she was working at a diner in Bronzeville. She bought a used French grammar book at a Goodwill for $2. She filled the margins with notes in pencil. By 26, a French chef walked into her diner. She greeted him in his own language. He froze. Then he laughed. He left her a $50 bill on a $6 check and told her manager she belonged somewhere bigger than that counter. She framed the $50 bill. She never spent it. It still hangs in her mother's hallway today. By 32, she had taught herself 6 languages. No degree, no tutor, no teacher who ever knew her name. Just a worn leather notebook and the voice of a grandmother who had been gone for 8 years. Make sure what's in your head is bigger than anything they can imagine. Tonight, on the 62nd floor, the world was about to find out exactly how big. By the time Belle returned to the table with dessert menus, Tanaka's polite mask had slipped. He was watching Gerald the way a man watches a small fire he is not yet sure he should put out. He had been checking his phone for 43 minutes. The interpreter was not coming. Traffic on Lakeshore Drive. a flooded underpass. No replacement available on this notice. Tanaka opened his leather folder. He pulled out a single page of contract language. Dense. Legal. Bilingual columns down the middle. He set it on the table beside his water glass. Mr. Whitmore, he said. His English was careful. We must confirm Section 3, Paragraph 2, before midnight Tokyo time. My board is waiting. This clause is the reason I flew here. Gerald waved a hand. Email it tomorrow. We'll handle it at the office. Tanaka did not blink. It cannot wait. Gerald's smile thinned. He pulled the page toward him and began to read. He made it through the first sentence in Japanese. He stumbled on the second. By the third, his accent had collapsed into something that made Tanaka look down at his own hands out of politeness. Just give me a second, Gerald said. He tried again. He missed the same word twice. The deal was 40 seconds from death. Belle stood 3 feet away with the dessert menus in her hand. She had heard every word. She also knew exactly what that paragraph said. She had read worse Japanese in worse handwriting at midnight, alone, at her kitchen table, sounding it out from a textbook with no audio. She set the dessert menus down on the side table. She straightened her apron, and she stepped forward. Excuse me, sir. Gerald looked up, annoyed, confused. What? I can help with the translation. He laughed, the laugh of a man who could not believe what he had just heard. You, the waitress. The clause requires mutual indemnification, sir. Section 3, Paragraph 2. I can walk Mr. Tanaka through it in Japanese if that would help. Not basic Japanese, not tourist phrases, legal Japanese. The kind that takes years to master and decades to perform under pressure. Tanaka exhaled, the first real breath he had taken in 2 hours. Yes, he said. Please. Belle pulled her notepad from her apron, not for notes, but to anchor her hands. She turned to face Tanaka directly. She switched into Japanese. She did not switch the way a textbook student switches. She switched the way a native lawyer switches, with the formal, honorific structure that legal Japanese demands, with the precise verb endings that signal a contract is being discussed, not a conversation. She walked him through the clause. 2 minutes. No notes. No hesitation. Subject, object, conditional, counterclause. Tanaka asked her one clarifying question. She answered it. Tanaka asked her a second. She answered that one too. Across the table, Gerald's fork was suspended halfway to his mouth. His Bordeaux glass was untouched. His wife, Catherine, had stopped breathing. 3 tables away, a woman in a navy blazer set down her glass of red wine and stared. Her name was Eleanor Brooks. We will come back to her. When Belle finished, Tanaka leaned back in his chair. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Gerald. Mr. Whitmore, he said quietly, your waitress just saved your contract. Gerald could not speak. Belle picked the dessert menus back up. Would either of you like coffee with the dessert this evening? She asked. Her voice was the same voice she had used to take the order an hour ago. Soft. Polite. Exactly the same. The room had changed completely. Gerald did not handle losing well. For a full 10 seconds he sat there, frozen, the fork still in his hand, his face moving through 3 colors. And then something inside him decided that being humiliated by a black waitress in front of his Japanese partner was worse than losing the deal. He chose to make her smaller. That's enough, he said. We don't need a waitress doing legal work. Tanaka turned to him slowly. Mr. Whitmore, with respect, she is doing it correctly. How would I know that? She could be making it up. Belle did not move. She did not defend herself. She simply stood there with the dessert menus in her hand. Then, Gerald did something that changed the temperature of the entire room. He reached into his wallet. He pulled out a $100 bill. He crumpled it in his fist, and he tossed it onto the floor next to Belle's shoe. Pick it up, he said. The dining room went silent. 2 tables over, an elderly woman set down her wine glass and covered her mouth. That's your tip for pretending you didn't understand all night. Bend down, pick it up. Belle looked at the crumpled bill on the floor. She looked at Gerald. Her voice did not rise. Her face did not change. "I don't pick up money from the floor, sir. That's not how I was raised." Gerald's neck flushed red. "You're refusing a tip? You're refusing a customer?" "I'm refusing to bend, sir." He stood up. "I'll make sure you never work in any restaurant in this city again. I'll make sure your mother starves. I'll make sure any child you have has nothing. Do you understand me?" Margaret Sullivan, the floor manager, was already crossing the room. She stepped between them. "Mr. Whitmore, Belle is one of our servers. She is not contracted as a translator. I'll call a professional service." "You'll do nothing of the kind." He turned to face her. He was half a head taller. He did not raise his voice. "What's your name?" "Margaret. Listen carefully. I play golf with Daniel Wexley every Saturday at Lake Forest. 18 years. One phone call from me tomorrow morning, and you don't have a job. 2 phone calls, and she doesn't have one either. Anywhere. Ever. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Margaret's face went pale, but she did not step back. She turned her head slowly toward the wife at the table. Catherine Whitmore had been silent all night. She had not eaten in over an hour. She had not spoken in longer. She set her wine glass down. The crystal touched the wood. The sound was small, but everyone in the alcove heard it. She looked at her husband for the first time all evening. "Gerald." One word. Quiet. Cold. The kind of voice 15 years of marriage builds for a single moment. "Sit down." He turned to her. There was a flicker of something on his face. Surprise, fear, the dim memory of who his wife used to be before she became someone who agreed with him. But he had gone too far to retreat. "Catherine, stay out of this." Margaret looked at Belle. Belle looked back. 2 women, 1 decision left to make. Margaret took a breath. "Mr. Whitmore, make the call. Belle, this is your decision. You can refuse. You can agree. That right is yours, not his." Tanaka, watching all of this, slowly closed his folder. He was no longer just a man waiting for a translation. He was a witness. Belle made her decision in the silence Margaret had given her. She did not look at Gerald. She did not look at Catherine. She looked at Tanaka. "I'll translate, Mr. Tanaka. Not because Mr. Whitmore threatened my manager. Because you flew 3,000 miles for this meeting, and you deserve to leave with what you came for." Tanaka rose halfway out of his chair and bowed his head. Just slightly. Just enough. In Japan, that small bow means something specific. It means, "I owe you." It means, "I see you now." Gerald watched it happen. He did not understand what it meant, but he understood that something in the room had moved, and that he was no longer at the center of it. Belle pulled a chair to the corner of the table. She did not sit. She rested her notepad on the back of it. She switched into Japanese and began. She walked Tanaka through the clause, line by line. She used the precise legal verb forms. She matched his level of formality without dropping into anything casual. She moved through each conditional and counter clause like a person who had rehearsed this language alone in a kitchen for a decade. Then she stopped. She read one line twice. Her eyes narrowed. She turned to Gerald. "Mr. Whitmore, there's a typo in your draft." Gerald blinked. "A what?" "Right here. One word. In your version, the responsibility clause has been written as shared responsibility. It should read identified responsibility. The 2 phrases sound similar in Japanese. They mean opposite things." Tanaka leaned forward. Belle continued. "As written, if anything goes wrong with this contract, anything at all, Mr. Tanaka's company would share the legal exposure. That is not what your team intended, and it is not what his team agreed to." Tanaka looked down at the page. He looked up at Belle. "How much exposure?" he said quietly. Belle did her best to soften it. "Approximately $4 million, sir. Maybe more, depending on the jurisdiction." She turned back to Gerald. Her voice stayed gentle. It was a typo. Easy to miss. She was giving him an out. Even now. Even after everything. Gerald's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Tanaka pulled a pen from his jacket pocket. He marked the page in 2 quick strokes. He looked up at Belle. "You just saved my company $4 million, he said. and Mr. Whitmore's company from a lawsuit that would have followed for the next decade. He paused. He chose his English carefully. Miss Nolan, we have a deal. Pending my board's confirmation tomorrow morning, but I will recommend approval personally. He extended his hand across the table, not to Gerald, to Belle. She shook it. In a Michelin restaurant, on a Tuesday night, in front of 40 diners pretending not to watch, a Japanese executive shook hands with a black waitress on a multi-million-dollar contract. Gerald should have been celebrating. He had just won. Instead, he stared at his wine glass like he had never seen it before. 3 tables away, Eleanor Brooks set her napkin on her plate and pushed back her chair. She'd been watching this entire exchange for 40 minutes. She had recognized the legal Japanese inside the first 30 seconds. She stood up. She walked toward Gerald's table. Belle did not see her coming, but everyone else in the dining room did. Eleanor Brooks did not walk fast. She did not need to. She was 56 years old, silver bob, navy blazer cut to her shoulders the way only custom tailoring fits, leather portfolio under her left arm. The kind of woman who had stood in front of heads of state and never raised her voice, because she never had to. For 30 years, Eleanor had served as a United States cultural attaché to Tokyo. She had been deputy chief of mission. She had negotiated trade language with Japanese ministers in rooms where every word had a price tag attached to it. Now she ran Brooks Global Advisory, a consulting firm with offices in 14 cities and a client list that included 3 Fortune 100 companies. She had been having a quiet glass of Bordeaux at a corner table, alone, by choice. She had heard every word of Gerald Whitmore's evening. She stopped beside the table. She did not look at Gerald. She turned to Tanaka first, and she addressed him in Japanese. She did not match Belle's level of fluency. Eleanor's Japanese was excellent, diplomatic, precise, but it was learned. Belle's was lived. Mr. Tanaka, Eleanor said. In Japanese, the whole table could now follow. I apologize on behalf of those of us in this country who still confuse a person's job with a person's worth. What you saw tonight is not who we are. What she did tonight is. Tanaka rose halfway and inclined his head. Then Eleanor turned to Gerald. She switched to English. Mr. Whitmore, I heard every vile word you said tonight, and I will tell you something that I do not think anyone in your life has had the courage to say to your face. She paused. Her Japanese is better than yours. Gerald's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Eleanor turned, finally, to Belle. Young lady, may I ask your name? Belle Nolan, ma'am. Belle, I have been hiring interpreters and cultural consultants for 30 years. I have hired graduates from Georgetown, the Sorbonne, Tsinghua, and the United Nations training program in Geneva. I have rarely heard what I just heard from you tonight. She reached into her blazer pocket. She placed a cream-colored business card on Belle's notepad. Call me Monday, 10 in the morning. We will talk about your future. She did not wait for an answer. She turned and walked back to her table without another word to Gerald. Tanaka stood up. He stepped around his chair. He walked to where Belle was standing. And in front of the entire dining room, in front of 40 witnesses, he bowed to her. A deep, formal bow, held for 3 full seconds. When he straightened, he spoke quietly. Miss Nolan, that was the most professional translation I have received at any business meeting in America. I will tell my colleagues in Osaka about you. I will tell them tonight. Belle could not speak. Her grandmother's voice was running through her head, the line about hands and heads. She held the cream-colored business card in fingers that finally, after 11 years, allowed themselves to tremble. Gerald did not say a word. He shoved his chair back hard enough that the silverware on the table jumped. He threw his linen napkin onto his plate. He grabbed his suit jacket off the back of the chair. He walked out of the alcove without looking at his wife, without looking at Tanaka, without looking at Belle. The sommelier followed him discreetly to the host stand with the unpaid check. Catherine did not get up immediately. She sat there for a long moment, one hand on the stem of her wine glass, the other resting flat on the white tablecloth. Her wedding ring caught the candlelight. Then she rose, slowly. The way a person rises when she has been carrying something heavy for 15 years and has just decided to set it down. She walked past the table. She walked past Tanaka. She stopped beside Belle. For the first time all evening, she looked directly at her. 15 years, she said. Her voice was so quiet, only Belle could hear it. 15 years I've been married to him. 15 years I've heard the things he said tonight. Different waitresses, different cities, different uniforms. Always the same words. She paused. She took a breath that seemed to hurt. I used to be a journalist, investigative, the Sun-Times. I wrote a piece in 2010 about the women who worked as housekeepers at the Drake Hotel. 4 languages between them. Nobody had ever asked. My editor killed the story. He said it wasn't interesting enough. I quit that week. I married Gerald 2 months later. She looked down at her hands. My grandmother was a maid in Boston. 41 years. She spoke 4 languages. Nobody ever asked her either. She looked back up at Belle. Her eyes were full. Tonight is the first time I have watched anyone refuse to bend down for him. You did the thing I never could. Not forgiveness. Refusal. Thank you. She did not wait for an answer. She did not deserve one yet. She walked toward the door. Then she stopped. She turned around. She looked at the small black name tag pinned to Belle's uniform. She read it slowly, out loud, as if committing it to memory. Belle Nolan. Then she walked out. Belle stood there alone for a moment. The dining room had returned to its quiet hum. The candles still flickered. The jazz still played. She looked down at the cream-colored business card in one hand and the closed leather notebook in the other. Her chest moved once. Just once. She wiped her eye with the back of her wrist. She turned. She walked back to her next table. She still had 2 more checks to drop. Belle did not call the number on the card that weekend. She held the cream-colored business card on her kitchen table for 2 full days. She set it next to a photograph of her grandmother. She made coffee. She drank it. She picked the card up and put it down again. On Sunday night, she sat in her grandmother's old armchair, the one her mother still kept in the living room, and she made the call from her cell phone. Eleanor Brooks picked up on the second ring. Belle, I'm glad you called. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Bring nothing but yourself. That was the entire conversation. The next morning, Belle stood in the lobby of a glass tower on Wacker Drive, 43rd floor, Brooks Global Advisory. The receptionist took one look at her, smiled warmly, and said, "She's expecting you." Eleanor's office had floor-to-ceiling windows over Lake Michigan. The view stopped Belle for a half-second. Eleanor noticed. "It still does that to me, too," she said. "Sit. I poured you coffee." She set a porcelain cup on the table between them. "Belle, I want to test you this morning. Not because I doubt you, because the people who will work with you will doubt you. And I want them to stop doubting you within the first 10 minutes of meeting you. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." 3 colleagues will join us. 3 live scenarios. No prep, no notes. Just respond as you would on a real day with a real client. Are you ready? "Yes, ma'am." The first colleague was a senior partner in his 60s. He slid a Mandarin contract dispute across the table. 2 parties, a failed shipment, a face-saving construction in the 3rd paragraph that an American lawyer would have read as a rejection. Belle read for 90 seconds. Then she looked up. They are not refusing the deal. They are using a phrase that means, "We need an exit that embarrasses no one." Your client should respond with a counter-proposal that gives them a way to back out gracefully. If we push them on the original terms, we lose them in a week. The senior partner nodded once and slid the page back into his folder. The second colleague was the firm's Asia-Pacific managing director, a woman in her 40s with a doctorate from Beijing. She placed a French regulatory filing in front of Belle. "Summarize. Flag any risk." Belle read. She got through 2 pages cleanly. Then she hit a phrase she did not immediately recognize. A single legal term about automatic contract termination, the kind of clause that triggered without a court ruling the moment a specified condition was violated. Belle paused. 4 full seconds of silence. The Asia-Pacific director crossed her arms. Belle felt the heat in her face. She felt the old voice in her head. They were right. You don't belong here. You are a waitress in a borrowed blazer. She breathed in for 4 counts. She breathed out for 4 counts. Then she did something Eleanor had not expected. She did not bluff. She did not try to fake her way through the phrase. "Excuse me," Belle said, calm, steady. She pulled her phone out of her bag. She opened a French legal dictionary app she had downloaded years before. She looked the phrase up. 8 seconds. She set the phone face down on the table. This refers to a self-executing termination clause. Automatic. No court ruling required. The other party can walk away without warning the moment a specified condition is violated. In your client's draft, this triggers if payment runs more than 30 days late. She paused. She made eye contact. I'd recommend negotiating that to 60 days, or requiring written notice before termination. As written, your client could lose this contract over a single missed wire transfer. The Asia-Pacific director uncrossed her arms. She looked at Eleanor. She smiled for the first time all morning. Where did she train? Belle answered before Eleanor could. Her voice was even. The public library, ma'am. Mostly the one at 95th and Halstead. The room was silent for 2 beats. Then the senior partner laughed. A short, surprised, delighted laugh. The Asia-Pacific director leaned forward. Eleanor. Hire her before someone else does. The third colleague handled Asia investor relations. He gave her a sensitive Japanese investor letter. Belle translated it cleanly. Then she added a recommendation. The reply should be written in the more elevated form of honorific Japanese, the kind that elevates the listener instead of humbling the speaker. The recipient is senior. The wrong choice will read as familiar. Your Tokyo office will notice. He nodded slowly. He said nothing. When the 3 colleagues left, Eleanor closed the door behind them. She walked back to her chair. She poured Belle a fresh cup of coffee. Belle, do you know why I just raised the offer I was planning to give you? No, ma'am. Because you didn't pretend. When you didn't know that French phrase, you did not bluff. You said, "Excuse me," and you looked it up. I have interviewed people from the Sorbonne and from Yale who would have rather guessed wrong than admit they didn't know. She paused. That, Belle, is professionalism. That is what I will pay you for. Not perfection. Honesty under pressure. She slid a folder across the table. Junior cultural consultant. 6-figure base salary. Full tuition reimbursement for any degree program you want to pursue. Health insurance, dental, vision. Mentorship under me personally for the first 18 months. Take a week. Talk to your family. Belle opened the folder, read the number, closed it again. Miss Brooks, I have to tell you something. Yes? My grandmother passed away 8 years ago. She raised me. She told me once that the world would look at my hands and decide what was in my head. She told me to make sure what was in my head was bigger than anything they could imagine. Eleanor's eyes softened. And what would she say now? Belle looked out the window. Lake Michigan was steel gray that morning. A barge moved slowly toward the horizon. She would say, "It's about time." Eleanor smiled. There is one more thing, Belle. Mr. Tanaka contacted my office on Friday. He asked, formally, that any future business his company conducts in North America go through an interpreter named Belle Nolan. He found us through your description. He did not know I had offered you a card. Belle's hand stopped halfway to her coffee. Belle, that is what reputation looks like when it is earned in one night. The first wave came from 9,000 miles away. 3 weeks after the dinner at the Wexley Room, Hiroshi Tanaka stood at a podium at a Japanese-American Chamber of Commerce gathering in Tokyo. 200 business leaders in the audience. He had been asked to speak about cross-cultural negotiation. He set aside his prepared remarks. He spoke instead about one dinner in Chicago. He did not name the billionaire. He did not repeat a single insult. He spoke only about what he called the quiet form of dignity that a country either recognizes or wastes. He told the story of a black woman who corrected a $4 million typo with the politeness of a diplomat. He said her name once clearly into the microphone. Belle Nolan, a senior business journalist for one of Japan's largest English-language financial publications, was sitting at the third table from the stage. She wrote her piece on the flight back to her bureau the next morning. The headline was simple: "The Waitress Who Saved a $4 million Deal, and What She Taught Me About America." The article did not mention Gerald Whitmore by name either. It did not need to. It traveled. Within a week, the story was picked up by Bloomberg, then Reuters, then a Wall Street Journal feature focused on the cross-border business angle. None of them named Gerald. But every senior executive in Chicago knew exactly who the unnamed billionaire was. They had played golf with him. They had served on boards with him. Some of them had heard him speak about waitresses before. Belle did not know any of this had happened until James Holloway, the sous chef at the Wexley Room, came running out of the kitchen during the Saturday lunch shift, holding his phone in his hand. "Belle, you need to see this." She read the article standing next to the dish station, with the tray of empty espresso cups balanced on her hip. She read it twice. When she finished, she handed the phone back to James. Her eyes were wet. She was not crying because the story had gone public. She was crying because Hiroshi Tanaka had given her the gift of being seen for what she had done, not for what had been said to her. He had protected her dignity by refusing to repeat the insults. He had told the world about her translation. He had not told them about the floor. The second wave came from inside the marriage. Catherine Whitmore read the Japanese article on a Tuesday night, alone in her home office at 11:30. She sat at her desk for an hour before she moved. Then she opened a folder on her laptop she had not touched in 15 years. It was labeled Articles_Drafts_2010. Inside it was the unfinished story she had written about the Drake Hotel housekeepers, the 4 women who spoke 4 languages between them and had never been asked. She read her own old reporting. She read the names she had interviewed. 2 of those women were dead now. 1 had returned to the country she had immigrated from. 1 was still working at a hotel in Boston. Catherine did not sleep that night. She wrote until sunrise. The piece ran in the Chicago Tribune the following Sunday. It was 1,900 words long. It carried her byline, her real name, her maiden name back beside her married name, both of them in print. The headline read, "The article I should have written 15 years ago, and the women I failed." In the piece, she did not write a single line about her marriage. She wrote about 4 women. The first was a housekeeper named Lucia, fired from her job at one of Gerald's properties in 2018 for spilling a glass of red wine on his suit. The second was a Haitian gardener named Joseph, who in 2020 had been refused payment for 3 weeks of landscaping work because Gerald had decided the man did not really know what he was doing. The third was a young waitress in Aspen Catherine had watched Gerald harass at a ski lodge bar 12 months earlier. The fourth was a black waitress in Chicago named Belle Nolan, who had refused, in front of Catherine's own eyes, to bend down and pick up a $100 bill that had been thrown at her feet. Catherine wrote one sentence in the body of the piece that the entire city of Chicago would be quoting by Monday morning. "I am not his victim. I was his accomplice. 15 years. This is my confession." She did not name Gerald in the article. She did not have to. By Monday afternoon, Twitter had connected the Tribune article to the Tokyo article. By Tuesday morning, the hashtag #BelleNolan was trending in 3 states. By Wednesday, 2 of the largest network morning shows had reached out to Belle's office at Brooks Global Advisory. Belle declined every interview request. She gave one quote to one journalist, a working reporter at a small Chicago neighborhood paper that had covered her grandmother's funeral 8 years earlier. She said, "I am not the story. The library at 95th and Halsted is the story. Anyone who has ever felt small enough to put a notebook in their pocket is the story. I just got lucky enough to be seen." 6 weeks later, the Chicago Public Library Foundation invited her to speak at their annual gala. She accepted. She wore a navy dress her mother had pressed that morning. She walked to the microphone in front of 700 people. She spoke one sentence, the same sentence, 6 times. First in English, then in Japanese, the language that had saved her dignity in a Michelin restaurant. Then in French, the language that had bought her a $50 bill at 26. Then in Mandarin, the language she had taught herself off a cracked cassette tape. Then in Spanish. Then in Portuguese. Each time the same words. Each time the same meaning. My grandmother told me the world would look at my hands and decide what was in my head. Tonight I am here because she was right, and because she was wrong. The room rose to its feet. In the third row, in a black coat, sat a silver-haired woman nobody recognized. She was clapping with everyone else. When the lights dimmed, she slipped out the side door without speaking to anyone. Catherine did not need a thank you tonight. She just needed to know that this time she had not given up. After the speech, a 14-year-old black girl with hair in 2 braids approached the side of the stage. She had been working after school at her father's diner on the south side. She was holding a small spiral notebook, half filled with Spanish vocabulary. "My teacher told me this was a waste of time," she said. Belle looked at the notebook in the girl's hands. Then she reached into her own bag and took out her own leather notebook, the one with 11 years of late nights inside it. She placed it gently in the girl's hands. "It is not a waste of time," she said. "Keep going." The dominoes did not fall all at once. They fell quietly, the way real consequences usually do. Tanaka Industries formally withdrew from every active negotiation with Gerald Whitmore's company within 30 days of the Tokyo article. The contract that Bell had saved was honored, but Tanaka redirected all future North American business to one of Gerald's largest competitors. He requested, in writing, that Brooks Global Advisory provide the cultural consulting on the new partnership. Bell led the Tokyo briefing personally. Daniel Wexley, the restaurant owner Gerald had threatened Margaret Sullivan with at Lake Forest, called an emergency meeting of his board 4 days after the Tribune piece ran. He stood in front of his directors and spoke about what he called a phone call I should have answered better. He promoted Margaret Sullivan to general manager of all 3 of his restaurants the following week. Lake Forest Country Club sent Gerald a letter requesting that he voluntarily withdraw his membership during this sensitive period. It was a polite expulsion. He did not return. Catherine filed for divorce on a Tuesday morning with the same lawyer she had quietly retained 2 years earlier. The settlement was clean. She kept her maiden name on her byline. 6 months after the dinner, Forbes published a short piece in their print edition. The headline was direct. How a 15-minute dinner cost Gerald Whitmore $200 million. Investors had withdrawn. 2 boards had asked for his resignation. He did not give interviews. He did not give a single statement. He simply disappeared from the lists he had spent 30 years climbing. James Holloway opened his own restaurant the following spring. Belle co-signed his lease and lent him her old French grammar book to help him write the menu. The restaurant was a small place in Bronzeville with 8 tables. It was full every night. Catherine returned to the Chicago Tribune as a senior investigative reporter. She wrote a 3-part series on working women whose talents had never been seen by the people who employed them. The series won a regional press award. A year after the Wexley Room dinner, the Emperor of Japan awarded Hiroshi Tanaka the Order of the Rising Sun for his contributions to international business relations. In his acceptance remarks, he thanked his colleagues, his family, and one black waitress in Chicago who had taught him what dignity sounded like under pressure. Belle Nolan worked at Brooks Global Advisory for 2 years before Eleanor named her a full director. Together, the 2 of them co-founded a nonprofit called the Ruth Nolan Language Fund, providing free language learning materials, library partnerships, and college stipends to working-class students across 12 American cities. The fund's first scholarship recipient was a 14-year-old girl from the south side of Chicago. Her name was on the application form. She had attached a copy of a single page from a worn leather notebook she had been gifted at a library gala 6 months earlier. On a Tuesday night, 6 months into her new job, Belle walked home past the building that housed the Wexley Room. She did not look up at the 62nd floor. She did not slow down. She just kept walking. Her mother, finally retired, sat in a paid-off house on a quiet street. On the mantel was a photograph of Ruth Nolan. Beside it was a framed $50 bill that had been hanging there for almost 10 years. There are people in your life right now you have not really seen. The man pouring your coffee, the woman folding your towels at the hotel, the kid bagging your groceries. Some of them have notebooks. Some of them have languages. Some of them have stories that could silence a room. The cost of finding out is small. The cost of not finding out is the entire point of what just happened tonight. This week, ask one question of one person whose job makes them invisible. Their name, where they grew up, what they did before this. You may not change their life, but you might be the first person in a long time who tried to see it. If Belle's story moved you tonight, tell us in the comments who your Belle is, the person nobody noticed but you. Like this video so the algorithm pushes it to someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so we can keep telling stories like this one. Share it with anyone who has ever been underestimated, because they need to know the room can change. She didn't raise her voice. She raised her language, and the whole room finally heard her.